Okay, so welcome. Today, my guest is Rachel Hughes. She is co-senior pastor with her husband Tim of Gas Street in Birmingham. She is someone that we've been journeying with together. Gas Street and Rachel and Tim are people who've been journeying together with wildfires over the last number of years, hanging out in a field together, singing, praying, studying, contending together for the renewal that we have sensed is imminent and is now amongst us. Rachel is a phenomenal speaker, and just a few people I've mentioned going, oh, we're going to be chatting to Rachel on the podcast. So many people are excited about that, excited about what you have to say, and tell stories of times you preached. I mean, as far back as when they were teenagers and they were a soul survivor. Like, it's there are people who've been inspired. Now. Yes, I knew I'd say something that would upset you. Here we go.
I am not at all. That's the truth. I am old now.
Yeah, no, it's great. Rachel, it's so great to have you with us.
Oh, it's such a joy. Yeah, as you said, that's one of the things, isn't it, about church is, you get to do it, you get to journey what God's doing across the nation alongside other churches. That it's just a gift. It's a real gift.
Yeah. And we have been on this journey together through wildfires, gathering together, like I say, worshiping together, contending together, really since, what was it, about 2017, 18, around that sort of time. It was, and probably before that even, and
pre-COVID. That's what sort of I remember.
That's everything, isn't it? It was before that thing happened.
Before COVID, yes,
yeah, and we just this shared sense of God saying something's imminent, God suggesting that something is at hand. We want to contend for this, and I think again, as we've gathered at Windsor. Certainly it's the last couple of times, but certainly it's last year, the number of stories that were coming around from across a number of us as leaders of this is what's going on. We're seeing the beginnings of this. Like, this is happening all over the place. These signs of renewal, people coming, finding Jesus, walking into church, and often with no history, no background of church, and just hungry for something, often amazing stories. What's that looking like in Gas Street? What's that looking like for you up in Birmingham?
Yeah, I mean, the word that is sort of, I guess, being bandied around quite a lot is this word awakening. That, and there's been that data that's been produced recently around the sort of the quiet revival or the quiet awakening. And I think awakening is actually a really helpful term because that does seem to articulate some of what we're seeing, exactly as you said. I think it's two things. Number one, we're seeing people come to faith, come to church, who have absolutely no framework for church or faith in their background. In fact, again, a lot of the Gen Zers, their parents of my generation, or should I say our generation, and, that a lot of parents who rejected faith chose atheism, and now their children are sort of thinking for themselves, and young adults, and saying, well, it didn't work for you, there's got to be something else. And so what we're seeing is God, by his Spirit, literally planting thoughts and seeds and encounters that are kind of almost outside of human partnership. It's like, oh, can we get involved, Lord? And stories of like I think of this guy called Cam, who just he was at this music festival. He'd been heavily involved in kind of the nightclub scene. He was a DJ, kind of dabbled in some dark stuff, drugs, that stuff. And he was at this festival about a year ago, and he just said it felt so dark and he felt weird and just like, oh, just wanted to get out of there. Left the festival, and he said he had this image in his mind of this Bible, and it was glowing. He has no frame of reference for faith, Christianity, but nothing. But he just knew it wasn't a thought he'd thought himself. And so he started reading the Bible, and then that led him to come to church. And he had a friend who was a Christian, and he connected him into Gas Street. And a year on, he is like passionate about Jesus. And that's just one story. Right. Literally people being woken up in the night with this compulsion to read the Bible, with this compulsion to come to church. A couple of weeks ago, these 3 teenage girls rocked up at church. They'd found us on TikTok. I didn't even know we were on TikTok, honestly. But so in a sense, I think, first of all, God is awakening people of his own volition, like by the power of his Holy Spirit, supernaturally. But what we're also seeing, and I think the two go hand in hand, is a new boldness to share it. That actually, I think for so long, and obviously we had the gift of the gift that was Alpha, and is Alpha, I should say, present tense. We still, love Alpha. Yeah. And in a sense, for a while, it felt like the evangelistic strategy was like, just get them to Alpha if you can get them to Alpha. We contracted
it out to Alpha, to our Alpha teams, didn't we? Tell them.
Exactly, yes. And that's great. And we're using Alpha all the time to say, okay, right, you found yourself in church. Now, this is what it's all about. Right. And invite your friends. But in a sense, I think what people, there's a new boldness for people to share Jesus where they are, in their schools, workplaces, universities, wherever it might be, because the stories of God breaking into people's lives just ignite a fire and a new confidence. And so that's some of what we're seeing. Yeah,
that's really exciting. I do remember before, in some of those like prophecies and sense, like before this was coming, just repeatedly kind of having this phrase in my head of going, whatever's coming, whatever it looks like, it will be unmistakably God who's doing it. It won't be us. And I didn't really know what that would look like. Yeah. But then I found myself over these last few months just going, well, I mean, it's not us, is it? Like these people are just walking into church. Like this isn't our great strategy. No. We haven't strategized a great awakening.
Actually, on the contrary, I've been really confronted by the Holy Spirit strategy because this is going to sound dreadful, but I mean, I love the Bible. I love the Word. I get to preach the Word all the time, and I think this is part of, and we've got to be so careful not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which we can so often do as human beings, can't we? But I think the seeker-sensitive movement had some really good things to say about being aware of what it's like for someone to come into the church for the first time with no faith background. I think there were and are some really key lessons. I think the danger, though, is that we assumed what was palatable for someone without faith to accept on sort of encountering God or encountering the presence of God or the truth of God for the first time. And I think I speak personally about it, I think I have inadvertently swallowed this narrative that the Bible it's a bit too much, to sort of introduce somebody to if they don't yet know Jesus. Like, okay, fine, let's introduce you to Jesus. Let's invite you to encounter the Holy Spirit. And then, when you're a little way in, then we'll introduce you to the Bible. Because, there's some stuff in the Bible that's a bit, and I feel like God's like, no. Yeah. Just give them my word. Yeah. Like, give them my truth. Yeah. Just trust me. I do know what I'm doing. It's like, oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah. I am so sorry, Lord. How have we done? And even I think you can apply the same with the Spirit. We have this phrase at Gas Street, an encounter and explanation. We never want to water down or sanitize the power of the Spirit. And again, I think one of the dangers with that seeker-sensitive movement or way of thinking is, oh, gosh, gift of tongues, bit wacky. Let's not do that on a Sunday. Right. Don't want to put off those non-Christians. Prophetic words, oh gosh. Again, that might seem a bit weird for somebody coming into the church for the first time. And again, I get the sentiment, but my goodness, what a disaster to remove those things from our expressions of worship together, because you remove the power. Yeah. And actually, as long as we're explaining it, let's not make assumptions that people have a clue what's going on. Let's explain what's going on. Hey, yeah, there's somebody just speaking in another language right now. Do you know God does that? He gives people this language, and it's an amazing, I mean, you explain it as you go. Let's not just rip out and remove the power of God.
Yeah. I think that's a really good challenge. And we can get so arrogant, can't we, about like, we'll decide what we should expose you to, or the Bible, or don't read these books. Start with John. Everyone goes, start with John. Read John. John's great. I mean, John is anyway. But
that's not a bad. If you want to start reading the Bible, that's a great place to start. Let's be honest.
It is. Yeah. But it's we kind of go, and yet there's God. I mean, throughout the Bible, we see God allowing himself to be misrepresented and misconstrued, and yet he continues to use that. And the church grows. And there are times when people are going, oh, God's like this and God's this way. And God, you can kind of feel God now in hindsight going, yeah, no, that wasn't me. That's not. I'm not quite like that. But and yet at the same time, God has all the grace and all the power to still reach us through all of that. And then so for us then to go, now, okay, we'll decide. Which parts are palatable or which parts aren't, or which parts are accessible or which parts aren't. There's an arrogance in that of going,
I agree.
We're probably misrepresenting God in a few ways here and there too, and God's still using it, and the Spirit could get past it, and has the grace to work with us. So we can, and often, like you say, particularly when people are discovering Jesus, they don't need the convincing to be all in. That's what we're seeing. They don't need any sort of convincing and going, well, start here, build gently. And they're going, no, come on, tell me. This is life-changing. I'm in. What do I need to do? How do I do it? And actually their passion and enthusiasm can be a challenge or a conviction for the rest of us are going, okay, great. Well, if you're in, we're in. Let's go. Oh, I remember when I used to be that passionate about Jesus. Where's that gone? And we can go and dig that back. And I think maybe that leads me on to, I've always said I don't want the awakening, renewal, revival, whatever, reformation, whatever we want to call it. I don't want it to be a spectator sport. I don't think it's supposed to be a spectator sport. And sometimes when I think back to moves of the Spirit in the past, that when I was growing up and in church and we saw some of these things going on, sometimes it just felt like, oh, well, these people coming to Jesus is an affirmation. See, I was right all along. So it affirms me. It might embolden me a bit, but does it change me? And if this is true awakening, this isn't just going to be an awakening for the people who've never met Jesus before.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What does renewal look like in us? How do we contend for that more? And is that something we're praying? We don't just want to be, spectators of what God's doing and celebrating what God's doing and encouraged by it and enthused by it. But actually, how can we be even greater participants in what God's doing and be renewed, awakened, transformed ourselves?
I think that's a really good point. And like I said, I think we are seeing a new boldness, a new confidence that's almost within the church, within those who are already disciples, and that's kind of a byproduct of seeing so many new people come to faith. And like you said, you watch somebody discover Jesus for the first time and have their life radically transformed. It is the most exhilarating thing to witness, and because that's happening a lot at the moment, it's almost like the culmination of multiple people just in awe of this God that they've discovered, this Jesus that has radically changed their lives. You can't help but get excited. You can't help but have your hope renewed and your confidence built. And I think the other thing that we're seeing that's a real challenge to the older generations, the Gen Zs, and I don't know. There's there's always a caveat, isn't it, when you sort of address an entire generation, because there's always you can't speak for every single person who's a Gen Z, but there are themes, aren't there? And I think they are all in. They are all in. That some of the Gen Zers that are in our church that have come to faith, they're fasting. They spend hours in prayer. They want to be at prayer meetings rather than down the pub. They're abstaining from X, Y, Z. They are taking their faith really seriously. Of course, when it comes to discipleship, it's key, isn't it, that we maintain that line between sort of religion, duty, and it's so easy to fall into legalism and religion. You have to be so careful that these sort of practices, these rhythms, are always leading us into relationship with Jesus, into mission, rather than into sort of self-importance and superiority. So we have to always watch that. But what I'm seeing is this desire to sort of engage with some of what we might have considered quite intense spiritual practice. Like, all right, chill out. Yeah. It's this overflow of, I'm in. If this is true and this is real, I'm not going to skirt around the edges. I am in. And I think it's been a real wake up to some of the older generations who've been following Jesus for years. And, like say fasting, for example. Right. This is fresh because I spoke on this recently at Gas Street. But statistically, only 2% of Christians fast regularly. And yet Jesus is pretty clear. There's an expectation. He says, when you fast, and then he goes on to sort of outline how you fast. And of course, John Mark Comer, who I'm sure many in your church will know, he's sort of, he's got, I guess, a contemporary voice for some of these spiritual practices. But in a sense, I think a lot of people don't fast because it's really hard. And it's not hugely rewarding in the moment. But these younger generation, they're like, we're going to do it anyway. We're going to do it anyway because Jesus said. And so I think that is some of the call, I think, is if you've been following Jesus for a while, how fully surrendered are you? And again, you've got to be so careful because it's by faith. It's by grace. It's through, let's not get into works. Let's not get into legalism. But, the revelation challenge is you're lukewarm. I want to spit you out of my mouth. What does it look like for some of us to just take that next step, to be more serious, more dedicated, more surrendered in our walk with Jesus? That's certainly what I'm thinking.
That's a great challenge. And I think you're right. It's so easy because we want to revert to formula, don't we? Oh, tell me what to do. Yeah. Tell me what to believe, and then
or what's the least I can get away with?
Right, that's how close to the edge can I get? Exactly. Yeah, what's the least? But and we want the formula to of God rather than the relationship with God, and that's that human condition, which is why we resort to religiosity and legalism, and because it's going but then what that leads us to is expectation. Like, God expects this of me, so I better do it. Because if I don't do it, God's going to be upset with me, or God's going to create distance from me. And expectation kills joy. So, because we're only ever, if there's someone in your life who kind of just everything's done by expectation, like that, the joy is stripped out of serving in those situations. And how to avoid the pitfall of the formula, the religion, I do this because I'm supposed to, or I have to, and how to keep our focus on how does this draw me deeper into relationship with the God who desires relationship, who wants to be known, wants to know, and wants to be known. How does this draw us deeper in? That's such a good challenge and such a good reminder of we don't do these things because we ought to. We do these things because we get to, because this is the invitation of a God who wants to be in relationship with us. Yeah,
exactly. And I think the other thing about those sort of religious practices, if we have the wrong motives, it can give us an illusion of control.
Right. That's exactly what formula does.
Yeah, exactly. We make it actually about ourselves.
Yeah, because formula. Because formula
No.
is the whole. That's the point. It's a subtle point, but that's always the point of formula. It puts us back in control. Like so, if. Sorry, this is my mind
I'm
jumping
interested.
off.
I want to hear.
So if I pray for someone to be healed, and they're healed, and then someone else asks me to pray for them to be healed because I just healed this guy, so how can I heal this person? I will probably use the same language. I'll probably use the same sort of posture. I'll position myself the same. I might even wear the same underwear if I can remember what underwear I was wearing.
Superstition kind of
right,
thing.
Because if I can crack the formula, that means that every time I pray for someone, they're healed. Well, now God's my genie. God isn't my God. God's doing my bidding. I'm not doing God's bidding. And what we do subtly is we flip the. If we think that salvation comes by believing the right things and doing the right things. Well, then if I believe the right things and do the right things, God's contractually bound to save me.
Yeah. In some ways, it's so much easier, isn't it?
It's so much easier. Right.
Approach faith like that. And that is...
It gives us control, it gives us power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the most frustrating and yet the most wonderful thing about faith in Jesus is that he confronts that illusion of control.
Right, exactly.
Because you have to trust him. You have the key is relationship with him and trusting that his grace works, and that there's a bigger picture, there's a bigger story that we don't fully understand. And again, thinking back to, I'm just, as I said, fasting sort of fresh in my mind, but the whole point of fasting is that you trust that something's going on that's beyond what you can see. Because honestly, when you fast, I mean, I can speak for myself personally. I hate fasting. I try and do it regularly, but I just feel really hungry. Honestly, I love food. Yeah. I just end up feeling really hungry. I don't feel like this mountaintop experience.
No, I feel like I'm a rubbish faster. Whenever I do it, I'm going, I swear I'm doing this wrong. Yeah, this isn't...
Exactly. But that's the point, that actually... physical hunger is the spiritual experience, because it's meant to turn, your physical hunger is meant to lead towards spiritual hunger, right? But also it's trusting I'm doing this physical thing that is actually really uncomfortable and doesn't actually bring the best out in me. Like hangry is a thing, but I do it because I trust that there's something else going on. Not that, as you said, not back to the formula, well, if I fast, then this will happen. Yeah. But more, there's something happening. I'm acknowledging that there is a spiritual realm that I know very little about, other than it exists, it's real, and I'm meant to pray in this way. Yeah. And so God is always pushing us to increase our trust. Yeah. To lead us into a deeper place of surrender, a deeper place of humility. And because humility and surrender are essentially the same things. Because humility is saying, you're God and I'm not. Right. And surrender is saying, it's all you. You're God and I'm not. Yeah. He's always trying to get us to that place. Why is he always trying to get us to that place? It's so much better that way. Yeah. Yeah. And we resist it, like you were saying, the human condition. We just resist it. We resist it because we love to be in control. Yeah. We love to think that it's about us. And I think part of the beauty of these spiritual disciplines, again, if we don't allow ourselves to fall into religiosity and legalism, the beauty of them is that they lead us to that place of humility and surrender. Yeah, I love that. And just listen to you, kind of reflecting, in a world, as I was speaking less than that, like in a world that's teaching us to be insatiable consumers. Yeah. Fasting is probably confronting that in us and absolutely and weaning us off that addiction to consuming. Whatever that form may be. That's Paul obviously talks about, the gratifying of the flesh. Yeah. We live in a world that tells us every second of every day, gratify the flesh. And part of the Christian walk is to crucify the flesh, because when you crucify the flesh, it gives life to the spirit. That's what Paul tells us in Galatians. And we find it's all the more difficult to crucify the flesh against a backdrop of a culture that is constantly telling you to gratify it.
Yeah.
And I agree, fasting amongst other things, it's just one little tool that's like, Lord, I'm going to crucify this desire, just temporarily, in order that you would bring life to the Spirit. And actually, Tim and I did this thing where it was there was sort of fasting within it, but it was abstinence instead. We abstained from a whole bunch of different things. Again, none of them wholly bad, but just stuff that we use as human beings: shopping, TV, social media, alcohol, sweet food, stuff that we use. Again, none of it is like downright terrible, but subtly you can use it to kind of just feed the flesh, comfort, self-medicate,
numb a little bit.
Numb a bit, exactly. And just for a time we stripped a whole bunch of that stuff away, and the prayer was, Lord, as I'm starving the flesh, breathe life to the Spirit. And you know what? It worked.
Wow.
Again, not the formula, but just that simple exchange is remarkable.
Love that. So leads me to my final part of the conversation really on this. So we've been contending for a few years. I don't want to go, we've been contending for years like it's been but for a few years now we've been going, come on, God, we sense something. We believe that this is what you're saying. We want to see it. We want to pray it. We want to contend it into reality. And now we're seeing that happen. But, it's being referred to as a quiet revival. And we knew this would be different. But I don't think any of us feel like we've seen it fully yet.
No.
What Jesus wants to do. Like, this is the beginning. How do we not settle for something that is exciting and good and affirming and all those things, but it's not? I don't think it's everything Jesus, the Spirit, was talking about. I don't think this is it yet. And do you have any sense of what's emerging? What lies ahead?
Can I be honest and say no?
Yeah.
I don't.
Me either. So it's fine. Yeah, we're in this together.
I would love to say that I do, and maybe there are others that do. We know that there are some brilliant prophetic voices in the networks that we're part of. I personally don't know. I think there are a couple of dangers, though, aren't there? That do you know what immediately came to mind? The moment where it's the Transfiguration, and Peter's like, let's put up, a monument or whatever.
This is great, right?
And she's, you can imagine all she's like, oh gosh, Peter. I really relate to Peter. I feel like I'm for all of them. Yeah. And I think the danger is you sort of make an idol out of the thing, the awakening, the hallmarks of it. And, like a little example, and again, this is not a dig at anyone in particular, it's more a potential danger. I know with the Asbury the Asbury revival that happened recently, they really felt God lead them to sort of set up this consecration room. And so anyone getting up onto this, you had to go through the consecration room. Beautiful. But the danger is because, like you're saying about formula, that's the formula, right? Yeah. That's the key. Every time we do anything, there's got to be a consecration room. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, because we have to discern what God's doing in our context. The point being, the danger is you sort of grab onto perhaps one thing, one element of what's happening, and you sort of become, again, religious about it. And again, we've seen that in past revivals where it's felt like certain, again, I don't want to be judgmental, because who are we to judge? But the danger can be you sort of hold on, grip too hard to what God was doing in a moment. Yeah. And actually, I think the Asbury guys did this remarkably well. They saw that it had a duration, and they weren't frightened to say, okay, enough now we'll send it out. And I thought that was actually remarkable. Yeah. The other danger is we move on too quickly and we revert back to form. Again, a bit like the disciples, they go back to fishing. And you don't sense Jesus' judgment in that. He meets them on the beach, he cooks them fish, amazing, beautiful moment. But they've gone back to fishing. and yet we know God has so much more for them. I suppose the danger is we revert to form, or it all gets a little bit too out of our control.
Yeah,
and a bit too much.
And I think linked to that, the danger is we collect our stories and we have our half a dozen stories, and then in 2 years' time we're still telling those half a dozen stories from this year, and we're not telling next year's stories or the stories after. And we keep living on the glory of, do you remember 2025? Like, that was amazing, right? And actually, it's the what's next. And I think for me, I wonder if it's how do we. I don't think it's going to be contained. I think we're already seeing signs that this isn't just going to be Gen Z. This is different generations, and I think we're already seeing some of that. But also, how do we make space for the Gen Z leaders, the 20-somethings who are coming through? How do we make space for them to help us reimagine what church looks like in this new iteration of how do we make space for that? And I think that's some of the stuff we're wrestling with here. How do we not just make them our stories or our trophies or whatever? How do we go, okay, well, this is where the Spirit's at work, so how are we all going to shift and adapt? What does this look like moving forward? And how are they going to help us shape?
Yeah, and are we going to have the courage to just hand things over? It's hard, isn't it?
It's really hard. Yeah.
Because it's not going to look the same.
No.
So we'll have to keep each other accountable, won't we?
Let's keep doing that.
Yeah.
Let's keep doing it. Rachel, thank you so much. Always just a joy to speak to you and to hear what you've got to say. Always love your teaching. Always love observing from a little bit of a distance how you and Tim lead together. I think that's really inspiring. Thanks. So, you are a gift. You're a gift to us. You're a gift to the church. Thank you so much. And this time is a gift as well. Thank you. Not
at all. Thank you. And just blessings on you guys and what you're seeing God doing there. Love it.
Oh, thank you.